Hello, my name's Jane Howarth, and I just want to share a little bit about my quilt. It's called Christmas Collage, and it is available as a pattern on my website. So you go to my shop, PDF projects, and there you'll see it. It contains about 16 different patterns, and each one would be printed on a 11 by 8.5 piece of paper. So they're that kind of small size. And you could include as many as you want into the quilt. And this one I did add borders, so it was kind of improv pieced once I had my blocks made. So I will show you more close-ups of some of the blocks, and I'll just talk a little bit about my process when I started this quilt and how you might approach it if you wanted to make this quilt. Let me start. This quilt measures 53 by 59. So it would, you could make it any size you like. And as I say, many of the blocks I put onto backgrounds that were 10.5 by 12.5 inches. And I'll talk about that again a little bit later. When I started this quilt, I had no color scheme in mind. I just kind of gathered different Christmas fabrics that I had and that I started collecting. Many of the backgrounds are the neutral ones. Some are plain, either cream or white. Some are light blue, a darker blue, some with print, some Christmas prints on there. So you could start with a color scheme in mind or a fabric line in mind, or just go with scrappy with what you have. So let me show you, this is half of the quilt. And then there's another row of blocks below this. So I will show you pictures of that quilt. So let me talk a little bit about my pattern, and then I'll talk you through the process of starting some of these blocks. All right, so this would be the pattern that once you purchase, you can print it out. Basically says there are 16 patterns, printing out at 8.5 by 11. I do have one larger pattern that I included in the center of the quilt, and that is a double-sized nutcracker. And I might add some blocks to this that I would provide as a free download probably. So it starts off, it lists the blocks. They're kind of in order from simple, getting a little bit harder. The string of lights, yeah, I'll show you that pattern, but that could be a border. And then we have the materials list. It's hard to say exactly how much fabric you're going to need because I did make this improv style. My sashing I put together improv style. And then I'll show you how I made my blocks. Right, this is the finished quilt, and there is like a double-sized nutcracker in there. And you can see the string of lights here. As I say, each of my backgrounds is really different. And then I have descriptions of how I made these blocks, talking about choosing your pattern, when I came to do the layout, how I did that, how I made this as quilt-as-you-go. So here you can kind of see I hand stitched my blocks, and then once I put it together, I added extra batting between in those sashing areas. I'll talk about that. So this would be my first pattern. This is the star block. And I was making these hand stitched. So you definitely don't need to hand stitch them. You could use decorative stitches on your machines. And what I like about the quilt-as-you-go, I might start off with my block, my background here. I have already put it onto batting. This is warm and natural. And then I would create my collage, put on here, and then hand stitch it. So this I can work on as I go, then make my next block, hand stitch that. And then once I come to put the whole thing together, I'm not needing to do as much quilting. So thinking about your background pieces, these I have here. So these ones, a lot of these blocks will go on to either 10.5 by 10.5 blocks, or some of those longer ones, 12.5 by 10.5. And so that means, as I piece these together, I would, to make those blocks fit together, I would just need like a 2-inch, 2.5-inch sashing. So that kind of keeps them a little more coordinated. And then thinking about these blocks, these ones I cut at the actual size. And really, these ones I added an extra 1/2 inch. So this one is 11 by 13. And so that means once I quilt this or hand quilt it, then I can trim this block down. Just gives me a little extra play because you never know, when you hand stitch, if it's going to pull in. So it's always nice to add that little extra to just give you a little extra security. So ideally, this would be 11 by 11, put onto batting, and then I could apply my collage and then hand stitch it or machine stitch it. So thinking about your background pieces beforehand, it's probably worth it. Just adding that extra size. So this star block I would put onto the 12.5 by 10.5. Some are a little smaller, some of the birds. Again, this is another easy pattern, and I will show details of the ones I made. And really it's just 4 different green fabrics that I've layered. I use glue, you could use fusible products, and then I've decorated that block. This is another easy pattern, just a basic size. And again, this would probably go onto a 12.5 by 10.5. These are my ornaments. So again, this one you'd need to just fill in the top piece there. And then the decorations, some is collaged on top, some are different fabrics, but some of these details are hand stitched. And again, you could make, this could be a lot bigger. You could add more ornaments. This is my dove. So these are a lot of white fabrics. So ideally, the one I made, I used blue background. And then this little hanger that hangs from his beak, you could add the year you made the quilt. This is an angel. Again, these details are hand stitched into the background. The owl. This one you could make it as fancy, or if you wanted to make a Santa Claus, adapt this pattern so it's more of a Santa Claus looking pattern. Snowman. Again, this is a lot of white, so you might just think about the background that you're putting onto. This is the Christmas cardinal, and this one I have made. I made it in a class. So this one, again, I've made, I've extended the block a little bit more. I've added some words on here, and that's totally optional. And this one, if you can see the hand stitch detail, and this is running stitch in here. That's on a white background, but you could always do it onto, this is a green background. So thinking about that, this is part of the strings of lights. So this is a 6.5-inch strip. I just used, I think it was like half a width of fabric. I can add, probably end up with 6 lights on here. I could make this, and I could, make numerous ones of these and decide what I'm going to do with them at the end. That was a small version of the Nutcracker, and this is probably the most detailed block, and this one I did end up making larger just to make it a little easier. Going through a couple more blocks. This is a robin. I think this one I did put on the 10.5 block. The reindeer face, poinsettias, a gingerbread house, I have had a request for a gingerbread man, and then the nutcracker, and then the nutcracker as a larger pattern, and then the strings of lights. So these I did collage, but then I did a chain stitch for the thread of it. So that's those. So just thinking about how I'm going to start this quilt. You know, I have these neutrals. You know, I could go with a lot of white, but just thinking about the dove that is white. I'm going to start with my star. So I did gather a variety of kind of yellow, orange type fabrics. But looking through my stash, I found I did have, let's see, a number of these fabrics. And just thinking about my sashing, you know, if I kept with these colors, and then I pulled out some kind of like plainer or more solid, you know, picking up on that turquoisey green color. Oops. And then also some red fabrics. There's a couple of reds. And these are a couple more reds. So I might play with this, and then I could include these in some of my blocks and just keeping my colors in this kind of palette. But as I say, I do have some of the yellows, so maybe I'll go with more orange. And then I looked at some of my neutral fabrics that I have. This is like a cream with a small print. This is a green dot. This is a cream with a dot. And so I could go with cream and even some whites. So I'm not too afraid of including both cream and white. What I'll do, I'll use my camera and I'll just show a few details of the blocks and my hand stitching. So looking at the star, you know, I do very simple hand stitching. So this is a lot of running stitch, a few stars. They say it's got those 3 fabrics, and I put it onto a blue block. Looking over to the tree here, you know, I just have 4 different green fabrics. The trunk and the hand stitching, I did a chain stitch and little collage dots on there. I did add some words. Right now this quilt, I put it together, I'd quilted through the batting with my hand stitching, and I just did an echo stitch with my sewing machine. I stitched between the blocks and the sashing. So it is quilted to the backing fabric. I could definitely come in either with hand stitching or machine stitching and fill in more of these blocks, because right now they don't have more quilting in, and I could use a neutral thread and stitch in the background. And here's my bird. He's on a neutral background. Just included extra leaves. And then going down here, this was my reindeer. So it did have a lot of empty space in the background. So I did this kind of running stitch, almost like rain, I guess. But again, this one has the 2 colors, and then I used more of a Christmas print in his neck. Right down here is the dove. This one I did 2024. The owl. So you can really do as much stitching as you want in each block. And I just found by making them one at a time, almost like a block of the month, I was able to, you know, spread the work out. So that's my little introduction to this and how you might get started. Later, I'll add some videos of me making the collage blocks and then some of the stitching on it, whether it's hand stitching or machine stitching. All right, thanks.